Do you want to know a secret?
Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Capstar from the Tech Feed, and welcome to the first episode of my new series covering C++. So we're going to be doing C++, and so let's just jump straight into this. C++ is a programming language. It's used really commonly in many different applications. Most big companies use it inside of their server grade products and stuff. They all use C++, and it's an amazing language. It's been made by a man named Burhan Estra, and he created the language with C and C++. C is a subset of C++, and C came first, C++ came after C, and C++ is what's newer than C, and it adds something called object-oriented programming, which is the main feature of C++ that C lacked. But we'll be getting into that later inside the series, but for now we need to actually get started and know where to write our code. So I recommend getting an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, which I can explain later, but basically it makes it easier for you to start up. It lets you write all your code and turn it into a program all in the same place. So what you want to do here is, first you need to get the appropriate version for your operating system. If you're using Windows, come here and make sure you get the bingw setup.exe. This one here, depending on whatever version you have, it'll have a different version number here. The bingw-setup.exe. If you're in Linux, choose the appropriate distro, download the tar.xz file for it, or use the PPA. Or use the PPAs, right? I'm on a Ubuntu-based distro called Ubuntu, and I use this PPA here. And if you're on Mac OS X, just install this. Here. Use the SourceForge download links. I feel those are the best download links. I prefer SourceForge, so but personal preference, just use SourceForge. So now once you got that done, let's start up our CodeBlocks IDE. And here we'll start up our code blocks, and here it will ask you compiler auto detection. Click on here, click set as default, press OK, and then here you see code blocks will just start up. So now you want to create a new project, and here we're gonna learn the basics inside of a console application. If you want to make any kind of application other than a console application, so if you want to create a game or something, which C++ is used quite heavily for, a console application will teach you all the basics logic behind it, and then later you can apply the same principles to making something like that. So you want to click on console application, click next. If you want C++ or C, we definitely want C++, because C++, as I said, C is a subset of C++. C++ is the superset of C. So our project title, so we'll be calling this, let's say, so you can call this whatever you want. My project is what I'll call it, and here you want to choose a folder to create in. I usually will create another folder on my desktop, but since this is my main machine, I will open up this YouTube folder which I create inside my other series, the Coding of the Interwebs, which you should check out. And Coding of the Interwebs is about creating websites, so I'll just use this YouTube folder that I have here created from back then. And here, YouTube, my project, and it will create a folder with the name of your project. So inside of this folder that you choose, so you don't have to give it its own special folder, it'll automatically create one for the project, and then it will give you the name of your project and a .cbp file, which is a CodeBlocks project. You press next and you press finish. Now here what you want to do is you want to click sources and main.cpp. So what this will do is it automatically generates this hello world program for you. And if you build and run this, which is what that gear icon and the play icon does, build and run, so gear for build and play for run, and here it gives you a simple hello world program, and you can press enter to continue. So that's cool and all, and we can make a more complex project in just a second, but first we need to learn what build and run does. So right here, what we're doing here is we're writing code in a form that we as humans can understand. We can understand that cout means output something to the screen, which it does. This lesson means take this and put it into cout. And then, well, obviously it's more complicated than that, but we'll have to cover that later because you need to learn it a little bit more. But for now, just think of it as that. And then this says hello world in quotations because it's a string, which basically means a whole bunch of characters combined. A character is one single character. A string is multiple characters combined. So since it's in quotes, since it's in double quotes, we know it's a string. And then at the end of this, pipe another thing into cout. Well, not pipe, but push another thing into cout and do end L, which stands for make a new line, end L. So right there we just learned a whole bunch of stuff, but we also know that this is pretty understandable. It's pretty easy for a human to understand. But a computer cannot understand these words. What a computer can understand, on the other hand, is zeros and ones. And back in the day, people used to program all in zeros and ones, and it used to be a pain in the butt to do. But now we have other languages that do what's known as being compiled into zeros and ones. So this gets compiled into a .exe file. This is a .cpp file, as you can see here. But when you finish compiling this, it turns it into a .exe file and it runs that, and that's what window that pops up here. This is an exe file that it shows here. So that's cool and all. And so that is basically the basics of compiling. Now, I don't want to get too in depth in that just for now. We can learn more about that later. But for now, let's just learn some basics. So, number one, if you've ever been in middle school math class or even late elementary math class, you'll know that you have something called variables inside of math. So, here inside programming, there's the exact same thing. So, inside programming, there's the exact same thing. And the reason, and you might see that the code is like tabbed out. I'm pressing tab, which indents it, just like inside of writing. Every paragraph is indented. Here in programming, everything inside of a block of code, which is basically anything surrounded with parentheses or squiggly braces, is a block of code. And if it's surrounded with this, you prefer to indent it so that your code is easier to read and you can easily tell that it's underneath this main function here. So that's why you'll see lots of people indenting. So here what you want to do is, we'll learn from the beginning. So variables. Variables can have, inside C++, you need to give a variable a type. So is it integer, which is an int, or a integer just like in math, a number without a decimal place? Is it a floating point number, which is a number with a decimal? Is it a character, which is a single character, as I said earlier? Is it a string, right? Or a string, right? Or, something like that. So, we'll just make it integer, and we'll call this variable now, unlike inside regular math, in which your variables usually only have one letter in them. Here, you can make your variables with more than one letter, and it's actually recommended to do that, so you actually know what your variable does. So you don't want to call something like x and then you are using x everywhere in your code and you have no idea what it means, right? So for example, we'll call this variable my number, okay? So this is my number, and you'll see here that I'm using a lowercase letter for the first letter of the first word, and for the first letter of the second word, I'd also use I use a capital letter. Now if there's a third letter, so for example, my first number would be, so first would be capitalized, my wouldn't because it's a first. The second one will be capitalized, and then the third one will be capitalized. This just like this is all personal preference. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's just that this is a common practice. It's a convention, as we say inside programming. So my first number equals, and what do you want to equal this to? We'll do 5. Now remember, we don't need to use quotes here because it's a number. Numbers do not need to be surrounded by quotes. If it was a character, characters are surrounded with single quotes. So for example, character A would be A surrounded with single quotes. And then if you're doing strings, you use double quotes and you type in all of your string into there. Okay? Now what we can do here is we can then output our first number to the screen, or my first number to the screen. So cout, which basically just means print out to the screen. Less than signs. You can remember this because you're taking something and you're putting it into cout, so it's like an arrow into cout. And here you do my first number, and this is why I like CodeBlocks, is because it has this autocomplete functionality, which is really nice. And here you can build and run this, and boom, you see 5. My first number is 5. Enter. So that's cool and all. So that's really cool. But what if we wanted to do strings, like a whole bunch of characters? So we can do the same thing with characters and stuff. But what if we want to use strings? Strings are a little bit different, in which up here you have to go in and you have to do pound include, and you have to include a string. You have to include string. Don't ask me why, I can explain that later, but for now we'll just do that. Now, if you want to use string variables, then for example we can let's go back here, shift home, and we can cut that out. So string, suppose we have string, my favorite word, and word, I cannot type, and my favorite word should be, what should my favorite word be? My favorite word is carrots. I don't know why I just chose carrots. That's the first word that popped in my head. So my favorite word is carrots. So now what we can do is, here we can see out, and then we can do less than my favorite word, and it will be the same as if we did see out less than carrots. Now here this doesn't make sense because we're only using it once. Why not just put carrots here? But you'll see if you use the same word over and over inside your code that you're using the word carrots many times inside your code. I know you probably wouldn't use it with carrots, but you know, maybe you are. And you'll see that it'll get messy very fast. And suppose your favorite word changes from carrots to apples. And then you have from carrots to apple, okay? So then you have to go through your entire code, change everywhere where it says carrots to apple. While when you use a variable, you can just use one place here, and you can just change it here once, and it can change easily. Now if you do build and run, you'll see it does the exact same thing as putting carrots directly inside of here. So that's cool. And so now we need to learn about user input. We want to get user input from the user. So what we need to do is we need to create a variable, and we'll create this string, and we'll create a variable called user input. Now this doesn't matter what this is called. So now if we use cout to output to the screen, what do we use to input? So I'm gonna give you guys a second to think about that. Okay, I'm impatient. It's gonna be cin. So you use cin to get input. So if we did cin, and then here, when I said that you use less than, because you're putting it into cout, when you're taking it out of cin, you use greater than, which looks like you're taking it out, an arrow pointing outside of cin. And here you put it into user input. So what this will do is it will create this string called user input. You don't need to put an equal to sign at the end. If you don't, it will just give you a garbage value in here. But since we're gonna be assigning a value to it using cin here, whenever it will ask the user to input in something, well, it wouldn't ask anything, but it will let you type something in and press enter, and it will put that into user input. So what we can do now is we can cout, and then here we can cout the user's input, which will be pretty cool. Now if we build and run this, you'll see that we get an error, which is count. Whoops, I did count. Okay, so we need cout, not count. And if you see this, you see we don't get the exit prompt. Instead, it's asking us to type something in. So I can say hello, and then here it outputs hello to the screen, and it closes. So we can press enter. So that's pretty cool, and this is just the basics. So right now we haven't processed what the user has input. We haven't changed what we're doing depending on what the user inputs. Later we are going to be learning to do that until the next episode. But this episode is coming to an end, and you guys should, if you want to learn some more programming, you can also check out my other series, The Coding of the Interwebs, which I teach PHP, PHP, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and that's an awesome series. It also teaches some jQuery. And until next time, never cut the feed of tech. Wow.